Hello, my name is Makeda Mahadeo and you are watching a CNBC special. Today we will be discussing financing and implementing transformative ICT solutions in the region. We are recently off the feet of the Africa 50 General Shareholders Meeting, of which the theme was investing in infrastructure for Africa's growth. And in the meetings, we saw discussions around big topics like bridging the infrastructure gap, investing in development, and of course, leveraging the power of innovation and ICT. During the topics, the buzzword leapfrogging was used quite a few times, and whether or not you like the word, that is something that ICT and technology has allowed Africa to do in many fronts. Now, the CEO of Africa 50, Alan Ebobise, mentioned in the speaks that it would be kind of hard to consider that when we can't even provide power to some areas. So we're going to discuss that today. I have three guests with me on the panel. First up from this side, we have Dr. Patrick Singa, who is the Medical Director for Babyl, Rwanda. Thanks so much for joining us. We have just to his right, Joseph Gama, Secretary General of South Sudan ICT Chamber. And just to his right, we have Alex Ntare from Rwanda ICT Chamber, the CEO. Thank you so much for joining us on this show today. And we really just want to discuss, as I said, the theme, financing and implementing these solutions and how they've sort of transformed Africa thus far and how they will continue to as we barrel towards our goals. Let's go in with the money, I think where it all starts often. You know, when we look at financing ICT solutions, a lot of the people that come up with ideas, especially transformative ideas, and we'll get into what transformative means soon, but a lot of the people who come up with these ideas maybe tend to not have connections to be able to get funding, tend to not have, you know, credibility to get funding, not even knowing where to get it from. How do we make sure that people who have the ideas get to where it can be implemented, get to have that money that they need? Let's start off with Alex.
Thank you very much for inviting me back to CNBC. I think the Africa 50 meetings have given us quite a big spectrum to look at things. When you're talking about innovative or transformative ICT solutions, there's starting points. And to your point, the people that come up with the ideas, how do they finance them, or how do we identify them? Which is the starting point? Today, we have a number of platforms that have developed across the continent. I think there's more than right now. I think more than 100 plus, if not 200. Incubation hubs, ICT incubation hubs or tech hubs, co-working spaces, where people with ideas are finding collaboration, where they are getting themselves an address. So if I'm looking for ideas, if I'm looking for startups to invest in or innovative solutions, that's where I'm most likely to go. I see that at the work we do at the ICT Chamber way back in 2012 when we established the K-Lab, and in 2016 when we brought the Fab Lab. And I tend to relate it to crumbs that fall on the ground, crumbs of cake that fall to the ground, and then you see insects gathering around that crumb. And that's what these kind of spaces help us do, because once you have a space where which is open, which is inviting, and you're running different programs, you're able to identify the innovative people. They crowd in, they begin to come, and that's where I've discovered a lot of young innovators in Rwanda that today some of them are leading on the market in terms of market share in the different sectors that they're running, whether it's in education or transport or agriculture. You create an environment that is enabling. Then, because financing these solutions is also staged. The person or the investor that is interested in financing you at idea stage is different from the investor that wants to finance you at a post-revenue stage, and also the one that comes in at scale. So the guy who comes in at scale has a different ticket size from the guy that is coming to look at you when you have just an idea, and their requirements are also different. And the instruments, the financing instruments are also different, whether it's convertible notes or equity, and the different agreements you'll need to sign up. Or grants also tend to play a big role in this. So I think if I was to say, that's where we're seeing, at least from the ideation stage, which has been the biggest chunk that we've been doing.
Sure. Before we go further into financing these projects, maybe to your point before we started the panel, transformative can be subjective. I'd like to get your opinion, Dr. Singa, on, especially coming from Babyl, what you consider to be a transformative ICT solution.
Oh, well, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here. For me, a solution is only a solution to the extent where it is useful for the population. It is a solution to the extent where it is solving an actual need that is out there. To give you a very silly example, I can come up with a machine that is going to clean up my shoes every day. It is indeed innovative, but it is transformative. To my view, it is not, because I could definitely do the same myself 100 times better. So it is to solve a societal issue. And this is what we are trying to do with companies as ours, where we are trying to disrupt, in the good sense, the healthcare system, where you're talking about somebody who, for his 30 years of existence, has been going to a health center, talking to a doctor, wearing a white coat with a stethoscope around the neck, and trying to convince him he can do the same over the phone. You're changing the way he experiences healthcare. For me, that is transformative healthcare.
Right. And a solution that has had an impact on Rwanda. I want to come to you, Joseph, because I know that South Sudan recently celebrated independence of 8 years. And so there are a lot of things that are happening now around still trying to make sure that targets are being hit and the country is developing in the way that you want it to develop. As someone coming from the ICT Chamber, what are some transformative ICT solutions that you've seen in the recent past?
Thank you for having me here, for being in this show. South Sudan, like you just mentioned, it's 8 years old. We celebrated our independence 2 days ago to make it 8 years. So it's a nation that has basically started from where there was nothing. Many other countries have had several years, as much as they've had some disruptions in the space of working. In South Sudan, we are basically starting things from scratch. It's just recently that at the end of this year, we'll be getting electrification of our capital city. That in itself is going to create, it's a catalyst for so many things that would come. About 2 weeks ago, we had Liquid Telecom launching the bringing of fiber optics to Juba. That in itself is another addition to the catalyst that will enable so many things to come. And then in the same space of year, we are having two platforms for mobile money transactions. So mobile money, I would put it as one of those things that would be very transformative. It would be able to drive it will basically, it's a disruption in the way things were getting done. So it's going to change people's lives. And innovations within the mobile money sector itself, you will now have financial inclusion being an element of that. So I consider that as very transformative.
Right. You know, there's no doubt that we've had many solutions that have transformed the way that Africa has developed. Like I said, leapfrogging is a big idea that we see happening a lot in the continent. But financing isn't the only thing that holds us back from getting that much further with some of the solutions that we have. Of course, there are other things. So I want to get into some of those other challenges. You know, right now, electrification of the continent is still quite low, and internet penetration much lower than that. Those are two big challenges that could be facing us. How, Alex, do you think we can take that on a bit faster than what's happening right now if we want to get towards those goals?
So I think we need to look at, I know today we're discussing ICT, but just like Joseph has pointed, electrification. So there are some fundamental infrastructural technologies that may not necessarily be ICT, but they're enablers. You talk about electrification, talk about education of itself, literacy, and digital literacy to that point. These are some of the where we see gaps, even when those transformative technologies or ICT solutions are being developed. You still need to onboard a population that is digitally illiterate and sometimes completely illiterate. And how you develop the solution that addresses that market or that group is going to require in itself innovation.
The main question is, who finances ICT? I think the main investor in ICT should be the government, in the sense that the government puts in place the basis, the basics. I'm talking about starting from the basic infrastructure. You can't have outside investors, you can't have private investors coming to work in a void place where there is no basic infrastructure. You can't have private investors coming in when there is no regulatory framework. You can't have private investors coming in when there is no incentive, like in terms of taxes, in terms of how conducive your environment is. That is where the government should invest. And then as long as you put that in place, and this we are seeing in countries like Rwanda, now you see private investors coming in, and then now you start seeing private-public partnership coming about.
Joseph, do you agree?
Yes, definitely. Just to complement what is already mentioned, even the human capital, you need to have the skills of the people who will be able to push such things forward. So it goes back to basic infrastructure. It's a challenge that we face as South Sudan. There's space where some innovations and ideas can flourish. So as a government, the biggest investment should come from them. And once you have that space,
right.
It's a catalytic thing. I mean, it's a de-risking, what Patrick is talking about. It de-risks my investment. If I'm bringing in money, I want to know that my money is going to fall on good money, not on bad money, because if it is going to deal onto bad money, then it's just it crumbles up.
I wonder how can that be transcended, because it can be argued that some of the places that need these solutions the most don't have that infrastructure. How do you think that we can tackle that? Whoever has an idea for that.
I think it's again combination and collaboration. We tend to see DFIs, development financial institutions, putting money that would de-risk. I think some of what Africa 50 and the Africa Development Bank are trying to address. If you look at what they have done or what they're doing with Rwanda Innovation Fund, is a situation where the government, in partnership with Africa Development Bank, they're putting up a 30% equity stake in a $100 million innovation fund that will now tells or sends a message to the limited partners, LPs, that want to invest in the fund. Look, your money we're also taking risk with you. We're walking this journey with you. But there's also what I've also seen in some of these things. You find investors or DFIs investing in the enabling environment, or even in at the ideal stage. Today we run a program, an incubation program, in partnership with JICA, which we targeting 50 startups. We're already done 20, and tomorrow another 10 will start, where they're bringing in the money to help the startups prepare and get investment ready for private capital. So this is a combination of not just one investor, but rather participating at different levels and players.
Right. You know, we've seen, well, it's no doubt that the past of somewhere like South Sudan can affect how much investment comes into the country. As we were just saying, you know, you want to know that your money is going somewhere safe. And we've been seeing around the region some effects that, some events, pardon, that could be affecting investment into the region, especially very recently. We've seen, you know, the fallout after al-Bashir stepped down in Sudan. We've seen an attempted coup in Ethiopia. And of course, there's an Ebola outbreak in DRC that seems to be spreading. How can we make sure that those investments are still coming in and are still being utilized in a way that will make an impact and sort of slow down those negative effects?
Yes, these events, South Sudan is not out of it. We've had a troubled past. I mean, our past has been painted with wars and things like that. Even of recent, we've had that as well. That in itself scares away investors for sure. There's a term we like to use, high risk, high return. I would like to. It's a very basic level of when discussing business. But as you advance, you want to talk about security for your investment. South Sudan in itself is a virgin. It's a virgin space. If you are looking at people, we don't have tap water running into homes. The problems, I would mention many of them, but as an investor, if you look hard, these are opportunities. These are opportunities which you can tap into and be able to see. You might not achieve the sort of level of comfort you might get maybe for example, Rwanda, but the market is there. Government is taking steps to make sure that investors are protected. Maybe not at 100%, but these are things we've realized and they're working towards that. They talk of tax incentives. If you bring in investment, government can be able to negotiate some of these things with you. And it's working towards creating an enabling space so that investors can come in and be able to participate in the development of the country.
How important do you think awareness is in this journey that we're taking to you know, being the ICT powerhouses that we want to be? How important do you think that is, and what are some innovative ways that we can bring it up?
I think awareness is crucial. When we're talking about innovation, disruption, and I think you need to be ready for it. ICT is both an opportunity and a challenge. It is a challenge in the sense that if you are not ready for it, it's going to destroy you. I'm imagining countries struggling with the likes of Uber because they had taxi company in place and then they did not prepare, they did not see it coming, and then that disruption, that huge disruption comes about. You need to be ready for it. When we talk about ICT, the power of ICT, you need to take into consideration the cultural background of the population you're trying to impact. Are they ready for it? You need to take into consideration things like the adaptation period that is going to take for people to reach where you want to take them. You need to be sure that people can come up with competitive ideas as regard to what is coming from out there. So for me, technology and ICT is an opportunity because it's an enabler of economic growth, but it's also a big challenge and we need to prepare for it. For instance, in my own experience, I've seen that, let me take the example of Babyl. We are providing healthcare through mobile phones, and that sector is so regulated. I mean, we are talking about healthcare. You do not sell healthcare as you sell potatoes or beers. You are impacting healthcare. And it is so regulated that you are not allowed to put billboards. You're not allowed to do publicity. But then it's a new thing. How do you expect someone from the countryside to know about this product and actually use it? How can the government, because me as an investor, as an innovator, I don't have the means, I don't have the shoulders to take all of that by myself. How can the government incentivize the population to use my products because they recognize it as a useful product? That is one bit of it. The other bit is, although and this I've seen in so many African countries, at government level, at senior official levels, you see that commitment. They understand that ICT is the way to go. But when you start talking to technical persons below the senior level person, you start facing challenges. People assume they know technology, but actually they don't. So how can you educate both the senior levels, the middle person and the below person? For me, that is a big challenge.
And as a country like ours, I mean, the level of how you're dealing with this problem might be a bit different from how you would deal it in. Ours would be looking at it as how can we come up with a strategy that maybe in 10 years we'll be able to achieve a certain level of literacy in ICT. Our literacy level is quite high. Majority of the population cannot read and write. So when you bring in ICT, it means it has to be we need an intensive investment in that area, as well as even incorporate it into childhood syllabuses, childhood programs, so that in the next 10 years, maybe we'll be able to say we have achieved this sort of level of literacy in IT.
Right. You know, one of the ideas that we've seen here at the Africa 50 GSM was, and during Kigali Global Dialogue, was this idea of looking at other countries, seeing where they excelled, seeing their successes, and just taking that, using that and implementing it the way that you can in your own country. Alex, I know that there were some different promotions and some different projects, such as one laptop per child and different efforts like that. What solutions do you think have worked for Rwanda? What have you tried, and what advice could you give to a country trying to raise their awareness?
So I think, actually talking about awareness, we've I think since 2013 we've been running awareness campaigns as a sector. The Ministry of ICT, by then it was Ministry of Youth and ICT. It has evolved, but awareness campaigns in rural areas where we go with private companies, but also with government service providers that are providing services or digital services, and just to awake people and get them to experience, whether it's digital TV subscriptions or paying for your internet, paying for your utilities using mobile phones. And that we saw it as a model that helped also increase on the transaction volumes that are coming, because one thing to have penetration and to have the services developed. It's another thing to also have them used. The other is what you just mentioned, the one laptop per child. As someone who works within the innovation ecosystem, I've seen the results. Going back to 2012, when we were starting with K-Lab and the first innovators that we received, the quality of ideas has tremendously changed, because the first group that we had are people that had access to computers at a later stage, rather than the ones that had the benefit of one laptop per child. And so by the time they're completing their high school, they are proficient or they're digitally literate, and then their innovations are way better, or at least more advanced than what their predecessors had. It's testament to the fact that some of these things that we have seen in the West working, access to computers, to devices, access to technological, early access to early childhood access to these things, changes the game. completely, because you build a digital native, a population of digital natives that are going to, in the future, transform the economy way better than the current population or current people.
I think my friend,
yes,
if I may, I think my friend has said it so fluently. I would like us to be also careful about, because we are talking about replicability. What models have worked so far and can be replicated in outside markets.
You have to edit, copy, paste, edit.
Indeed. And that's exactly my point. Some model can be copied and pasted as such, but I think we need to be very careful because, I mean, let me give you an example. You're taking this product that you're providing through an app, which is powered by artificial intelligence. You're providing healthcare through that. And then you like, okay, let me take this product, bring it to markets like Rwanda and see what happens. So what market are we talking about? We're talking about a market where phone penetration is not ideal, not yet. We are not yet where we want to be. Smartphone penetration is even lower, maybe 20%. So you're only addressing the problem to do with that particular segment of the population. Why not look at solutions like USSD app and alternative way, and those can be replicated in similar markets?
As we come up on the end of our time for this panel, is there any final words that you would like to convey, a message or a success, something that the audience can go away with? Should we start with Alex?
So for me, last comments I could give is ICT innovations or financing ICT transformative innovation solutions is going to require more than just one party, more than just one partner, one player, and different technologies at the same time. So combination of technologies, collaboration of partners, and awareness and digital literacy is what is going to help countries' economies to really move from just the strategies to implementing.
Right, Joseph?
Yeah. My last remarks basically is like it's basically in line with what Alex has mentioned. There are different levels, the pillars. I think I got a chance to see during the presentation. They mentioned 5 pillars that are important in enabling ICT, the uptake of ICT, and finance is one component of it. So once you put all these things together, the government has to play its role, as well as the private sector and the donor community, which is quite involving in this sort of things. So once we put this together, I think we'll be able to achieve and enable a space where ICT can flourish.
Right, Dr. Singa?
Maybe 2 words. One is, indeed, about 50% of the African population is not yet connected. I do not see it as a challenge, I see it as an opportunity for investment. We can only grow. Secondly, if we continue doing things the same way, we're going to get the same results. And for me, technology is the only way to leapfrog. You can't indefinitely build hospitals, you can't indefinitely build schools and train doctors. At some point, you need to look at other ways. And technology, for me, is the solution.
Right. Well, thank you to everyone who has joined the discussion today. And if you have anything to add to the discussion, make sure that you tag us on Twitter at CNBC Africa. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Makeda, and we'll see you the next time.